Hey y'all, Erin here. It is the middle of September. I have not filmed anything since the beginning of July. You know how it is, time just got away from me, so I am going to try and do my July and August wrap-ups in one video really quick because there's a live that I want to watch starting at 4:30, which is 9 minutes from now, so I'm probably gonna be late. So July, way the heck back in July. The first book that I finished in July was Race to the Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. It was part of the Rick Riordan Presents series where he highlights authors of color, underrepresented authors, which I just think is absolutely fabulous. I love the program. It's a pretty solid recommendation for me. The books that he highlights tend to be the sort of genre that I'm into, which is, you know, fantasy, supernatural, mystical elements. In the case of Race to the Sun, it is a middle grade book. I would say that although it was a really well-written book, it was definitely, I was not the intended audience. And I found the characters really annoying. Yeah. But the elements of the Navajo mythology was really interesting to me. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is also by Rebecca Roanhorse. So it was definitely not a, I disliked it, would not recommend. Would highly recommend if you actually are in middle school. And definitely check out some of the author's adult fiction, which I did. So next book was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This one was really good. If you are a fan of like classic Gothic literature, Dracula, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, it really has that same atmosphere. Yellow wallpaper was definitely getting that feeling from it. Just the atmosphere in this book was absolute perfection. It was so good. I don't really want to say anything else because I don't want to spoil it, and I think that it does do a very good job of building suspense and making it not so obvious what's going on in this isolated farmhouse, mining house. It was miners. Highly recommend. Very good read. Hi, Mia. You gonna say hello? You're just a little off frame. Next read for July is Fierce Fairytales, Poems and Stories to Stir Your Soul by Nikita Gill. This one was my feminist book box club pick for the month of July. I will say I am a fan of poetry, and I read a moderate amount of it. These felt fairly juvenile. I got the impression that the intended audience for this was also younger than I am. But if you are new to poetry or new to feminism, so basically if you're a teenager, I think this would be a really good, solid pick. The poems are fun. They're retellings of classic fairy tales. I particularly enjoyed the Peter Pan cycle in here. It was very good. I am not trying to like diss on the poems in here by any means. This was a very enjoyable read for me. Just a little bit on the simpler side of poetry. The next one I read was a library book. It was The Witch King by H.E. Edgmon. So that one is fun. It's a trans author, trans main character, other trans and non-binary, you know, we got the whole alphabet soup represented in this book. which is always fun for me. It's a very fast-paced story, sucked me right in. I think it only took me 3 days to finish the book. I will say that if you're a character-driven reader, this might not be the one for you, because the characters are all kind of obnoxious. I can't even remember the main character's name now, but I was not a fan of him. But the plot really kept it going for me. It really does suck you in and you want to know what happens, and there's an excellent plot twist at the end that made me really mad that book 2 isn't out yet. So it's definitely one that when the second book comes out, I will probably reread this one and then read the second one. So it was an enjoyable story. And last, and my absolute favorite for the month of July, was The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So I will say there is some controversy around this book, if you are unaware. In an interview, TJ Klune did say that the story is inspired by what he learned about the 60s scoop, which, if you're unfamiliar, is the Canadian program of forcibly separating Indigenous children from their parents, putting them into boarding schools, and trying to strip them of their culture. This was not something that was unique to Canada. The United States had the exact same program. For both of them, they did not end until, I want to say, the 90s. And the Canadian program in particular was in the news around this time because July was when they started finding bodies buried at these schools, and there were at least 1,000 at the last count that I saw. So that is obviously a tragedy, and people were criticizing Klune for writing this story, but he is not Indigenous. He is a gay white man. And so I kind of, I read what there was about his inspiration, and ultimately I decided that history doesn't belong only to the people directly affected, and the book that he wrote, if you don't know that that was his inspiration, it's not particularly obvious. He's not co-opting Indigenous culture in writing this book. He is highlighting the tragedy of taking children away from their parents and trying to strip them of their culture. And that is something that I think that we should all be paying attention to, and we should all dislike. So I made the choice to read the book. Other people may disagree with that choice. As news was breaking of these bodies being found at the schools, should he have maybe made some additional statement or gesture or something? Maybe. But I don't think that he was by any means the bad guy that people were trying to paint him as. It felt very much like the attack of the woke mob. So I made the choice to read the book. I loved the book. It makes very good points about the importance of fighting bureaucracy, not letting your life become the system, not becoming a cog in that machine, and standing up for injustice when you see it. It's also a really sweet love story, a wonderful example of the found family trope. It's just a delightful slow burn, and I love a slow burn love story. So I would say that this book was a winner for me. And if you're into slow burn romance and found family, it might be a winner for you too. And that was September. We're only 10 minutes in, so I'm only a few minutes late so far. I did not read very much in August either. I was feeling a little slumpy in, ooh, I said September, didn't I? That was July. That was my July wrap up. It is currently September. Where did 2021 go? It's moving too fast. So I was feeling a little slumpy in July and August. I just didn't have a whole lot of energy for reading. There were other things that I wanted to spend my time on. So first book finished in July was the Daodejing, a graphic novel version. My husband is really into the Daodejing. It is a guiding philosophy for him. So reading this definitely made me feel like I understood him a little bit more, which was very sweet. I actually did buy this with the intent for it to be his. But you know, we live in the same house. The books are all mixed together. But I liked this because it has the canto on one side and then an illustration on the other. And I didn't think that all of the illustrations were perfect examples of, or perfect interpretations of what the cantos were trying to tell us, but I did think that they got very close, and I do think that the illustrations made the cantos much more accessible. You know, it is a philosophical work. The meaning is not inherently obvious, and I think that I will need to read several more translations and compare and contrast before I really feel confident in saying that I understood what this philosophy is. But it did definitely resonate with me, and I'm looking forward to exploring more. So the next book for August, Conflict is Not Abuse, Overstating Harm, Community Responsibility, and the Duty of Repair by Sarah Schulman. This was the August pick for Jess Owen's Nonfiction Book Club. I gave this 2 stars on Goodreads. It was not an enjoyable read for me. I fell asleep several times while reading it. It had good points to make, and I think that if Schulman had stuck to her more scientific, fact-based points, instead of getting lost in the weeds and examples from her own life, that this book would have worked a lot better for me. But instead, she uses a lot of personal examples, but in those examples, she is always the good guy and everybody else is the bad guy. And it felt more like a book of her defending herself. And it made me wonder who she abused, that she felt the need to write a book to make herself look good, was kind of my overall impression. And that was kind of the general impression of everyone else in the Discord and in the live chat too. So that video is on Jess Owen's channel if you are curious and want to learn more. But that one was not a winner for me, which is okay because I'm already into this month and it is a much better choice. So this month is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. All right, and then continuing in my graphic novel manga trend for this month, this is Uzumaki by Juno Ito. Uzumaki is the Japanese word for spiral. If you are a Naruto fan, like me, you have already been familiar with the word. Oh my god, this was so good. So I was a huge manga nerd in junior high and high school. I had a very impressive collection, and then when I left for college, I decided that I needed to pretend to be a grown-up and get rid of all my manga. And if I could go back in time and kick 17-year-old me's ass, I absolutely would, because that was a stupid choice. I mean, it was like a few $100s worth of manga that I just gave away. So it's been many years since I really got into a manga kick, and this was a really fun way to get back into it because the whole story is contained in just the one book. Granted, it's a chunky one, but it starts off, I have to just show you some of these, the illustrations are just fabulous. So it starts off as a single, each chapter is kind of a standalone story, and it's about halfway through that the stories really start to build on each other and become a cohesive whole, which I really enjoyed. So the chapter title pages are color, everything else black and white. I'm not going to show you too many of the images from in here because they gave me nightmares. It was delightful. Highly recommend. And I cannot wait to read some more of Juno Ito's work because this was twisted. It was so good. Yep. All right, and then my next book, I finished The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. I'm still not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So this is book 2 in Remembrance of Earth's Past. That's the trilogy that starts with the 3-body problem. I read the 3-body problem actually last year. It took me ages to get through. And at the end of it, I was kind of left feeling a little like, what is happening? So it took a bit for me to get like the motivation up to start the next one. This went much faster for me, despite the fact that it is actually a longer book. And I'm reading the 3rd one now, and it is speeding by fastest of all. So they're picking up. I had to make the decision to not treat the science as science and just treat it as a magic system, as if I was reading fantasy, because I was getting too caught up in whether the science was real. And that's kind of just not the point, because there are aliens. So, moving on, because I'm running out of time. Next one that I read was Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. It's my second Aiden Thomas book of the year. I really enjoyed Cemetery Boys, so I decided to give Lost in the Neverwoods a try. It is his most recent book. I think it's only been out for a couple of months. There was some initial controversy when he announced it because there are no LGBTQ characters in this one, and people are like, but you're a trans author. Why are there no trans characters? And that's his prerogative. He doesn't have to include LGBTQ characters just because he's part of the queer community. I thought that it was a really enjoyable retelling of the Peter Pan myth. I really enjoy retellings. Apparently I really enjoy Peter Pan retellings because that was my favorite out of Fierce Fairytales too. This book was like dark and fluffy at the same time. It's one of those books that's very accessible. You can speed right through it. Super enjoyable to read. It is dark though. Yeah. I don't want to say too much because I will give things away, and it's enough of a twist that it is possible to spoil it even if you already know Peter Pan, which who doesn't know Peter Pan? But I'm definitely going to be buying a copy of that one. I will definitely want to reread that in the future because it's exactly the sort of like break the funk, quick and easy read that I like. Next, Yes, I'm Haunting This by Huda Fahmy. The hilarious truth about life in a hijab. So I follow Huda on Instagram. I really enjoy her comics. I really like the simplicity of her style. It kind of is reminiscent of like XKCD for me in that, or Chris Halbeck's style. Just super simple. The drawings aren't distracting from the dialect. And she makes her points very quickly and succinctly, and you get it, and it's exactly what you need. And she somehow manages to make the discrimination that she faces on a daily basis funny. So there's that. This was an impulse purchase when I went to Powell's, and I totally didn't regret it, even though I'd read most of these comics already, because like I said, I've been following her on Instagram for years. But it was a fun read. Would definitely recommend. Mia. I'm just off frame again. Okay, 2 more. Oop. The Queer Bible. It's a collection of essays edited by Jack Guinness. This I read very, very slowly. I tried to only read 1 essay a day, just to kind of savor the experience. I thoroughly enjoyed all of the essays in here. Some of them definitely resonated more with me than others. I particularly enjoyed the essay by Elton John, and there's also an essay about Elton John, which was kind of fun. And then there's an essay about David Bowie, who has long been one of my favorite musician, actor, famous people. Big David Bowie fan. So it was fun to read the essay about him. Cons for this book would be, it is formatted as if it is a magazine. Let me see if I can just quickly. So it does things like the full page, big text, the interruption of the text with things that are in other parts of the essay. I did not find that enjoyable. I actually found it really distracting, and it's kind of the same reason that I don't read a lot of like magazine type essays. So that was a con for me. I will say that it definitely felt like it tried to be global and to represent a lot of different viewpoints within the queer community, but by and large, this is still a white gay man's viewpoint. But it does get points for trying. It did try. So overall, thoroughly enjoyed. It reminded me of some movies that I had not watched in a very long time, so that was really fun to then go back and watch Priscilla, Queen of the Desert again, and But I'm a Cheerleader, which is one of my favorite queer movies out there. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. And very last book. So like I said, we're starting and ending this video with Rebecca Roanhorse. This is Black Sun. It is the first book. I don't know if it's going to be a duology, trilogy, series. This book ends on such a massive cliffhanger. Such a massive cliffhanger. Save yourself. Wait for the second one to come out. Read them both at once. As soon as the second one comes out, I will report back on whether it also ends in a cliffhanger. Because, wow. We literally end not knowing who's still alive and who's dead. And there are options. It could be either one. For like 3 characters. So that was frustrating. But, oh my god, this story was so good. So good. The characters are amazing. I slowed down a little bit each time we got to Naranpa. I didn't find her as interesting. Her bits were a little bit more political, but she wasn't very good at playing politics. And I just was a little less interested in the politics than I was in, you know, female ship captains kicking ass and people with who may or may not be gods. So again, we get a lot of, it's got a very Mesoamerican feel to the mythology being used in this. Thoroughly enjoyable read. Tried really hard to read it slowly. Did not succeed. Ended up reading the second half in like a day. So, Rebecca Roanhorse, I need that second book to come out. Please and thank you. I need to know. I think it's supposed to come out in like April of 2022, so I've got to wait ahead of me. By which point I'll probably reread this one. You'd think I'd have learned my lesson not to start reading a series that isn't done yet, but apparently I'm a slow learner. So that was July and August, kind of in a whirlwind. And in another 2 weeks, I'll tell you what I read in September. Until then, stay safe out there, y'all.